I arrived at the cemetery just before midnight, when the air had already cooled enough to carry smells instead of heat. Damp earth, old stone, something faintly metallic, like rusted iron mixed with decay. The locals called this place the Plague Cemetery, a burial ground sealed off after an outbreak centuries ago, when entire families were lowered into the ground within days of each other, wrapped in hurried shrouds, prayers unfinished. No flowers grew here anymore. No birds nested in the surrounding trees. Even insects seemed reluctant to linger. I stood at the rusted gate for a long moment before stepping inside. The first rule echoed in my mind, as it always did. Ask for permission. Not from authorities, I had already done that, but from the place itself. I whispered it quietly, almost embarrassed by my own voice. I said I was only here to observe, to listen, to leave things exactly as they were. The wind stirred slightly, pushing against my back, as if urging me forward, or warning me not to linger at the threshold. The ground inside the cemetery was uneven, rising and falling in subtle waves beneath my boots. Many of the graves had no headstones anymore, just shallow mounds of soil that time had failed to flatten. These were mass graves, plague pits. I knew that from old municipal records and faded maps I'd studied during reconnaissance. The fourth rule, and often the most ignored by amateurs. But knowing something on paper was different from standing on it. The soil felt soft, too soft. Each step produced a quiet exhale, a sound like breath being released through damp cloth. That was when I noticed it wasn't just my footsteps. Between my movements, there were other sounds, slow, irregular sighs coming from beneath the ground. Not everywhere, only in certain patches. I stopped walking, held my breath, and listened. The cemetery breathed, not metaphorically, literally. The soil rose and fell by fractions of an inch, almost imperceptible, like a chest struggling to draw air. I told myself it was decomposition gases escaping through porous ground, a known phenomenon in plague burial sites. I'd read about it. I'd explained it to others, but explanations feel thin when the earth exhales beneath you. I lifted my camera, the second rule, take nothing but photos, and snapped a few images, careful not to disturb anything. The flash briefly revealed details my eyes had missed. Shallow depressions shaped vaguely like shoulders. The outlines of bodies long since collapsed into themselves. When the light died, the darkness felt heavier, as if it had gained weight from what it briefly revealed. I moved deeper into the cemetery, following a narrow path barely visible under moonlight. Stone markers leaned at unnatural angles, some cracked clean through, others marked with symbols instead of names. Crosses mixed with older signs, circles, crude carvings meant to ward something off. Fear didn't arrive all at once. It came gradually, like cold seeping through fabric. I reminded myself of the third rule, never go alone. Technically, I wasn't. I had remote monitoring equipment set up outside the grounds, a live audio feed running. Someone would hear me if something went wrong. That thought offered little comfort. The air grew thicker near the center of the cemetery. Every breath tasted stale, as though the oxygen had been used and reused for centuries. My flashlight beam trembled slightly, not from my hands, but from the air itself, distorted by rising vapors from the soil. And then I felt it again, movement beneath my feet, more pronounced this time. The ground lifted slowly, then sank back down. A long, deliberate inhale, a pause, an exhale. I crouched and placed my palm flat against the earth. It was warmer than it should have been. Not just insulated warmth, but something active, alive. I pulled my hand back immediately, heart pounding, aware of how quiet everything had become. Even the wind had stopped. Silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by that soft, rhythmic sound below. I remembered a line from an 18th century physician's journal I'd read during research. He described visiting a similar cemetery weeks after the outbreak ended, noting that the ground did not settle but labored, as though the dead had forgotten how to rest. At the time, I'd assumed metaphor. Standing there now, I wasn't so sure. As I stood, my flashlight flickered. Just once. Then again. Electrical interference, I told myself. Underground gases could affect equipment. Still, I switched it off and stood in darkness for a few seconds, letting my eyes adjust. That was when I heard it. Not breathing this time, but something closer to a whisper. Low, fragmented. Not words exactly, but patterned sound. Like voices trying and failing to form language. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, seeping up through the soil, sliding between gravestones, brushing past my ears. I felt an overwhelming urge to respond, to answer. The idea slipped into my mind uninvited, as natural as breathing. That frightened me more than the sound itself. I clenched my jaw and stayed silent, remembering why the rules existed in the first place. When I turned to leave the center of the cemetery, I realized the path behind me had changed. The stones were closer together now, the space between them narrower than before. Or maybe it only felt that way. I took a slow step back, then another, carefully retracing my route. With each step, the breathing grew louder, faster, as if the ground sensed my intention to leave. I didn't run. Running would have meant panic, and panic leads to mistakes. I walked, slowly, steadily. Every instinct screamed at me to break into a sprint, but I forced myself to obey the rules one last time. Observe, document, survive. Just before I reached the gate, the breathing stopped entirely. The sudden silence was worse, and that was when something beneath the largest mass grave shifted violently, as if whatever had been breathing was finally waking up. The silence lingered longer than it should have. No wind, no insects, no distant city noise beyond the cemetery walls. It felt staged, as if the place itself were waiting to see what I would do next. I paused near the gate, one hand resting on cold iron, and listened. My instincts told me not to leave yet. Not because it was safe to stay, but because something had already noticed me. Turning my back too soon felt like an invitation for it to follow. I turned slowly and faced the largest mass grave again. In the dim moonlight, the soil there no longer moved in gentle rises. It quivered. Small tremors rippled across the surface, like muscles tightening beneath skin. I adjusted my camera and zoomed in, careful not to step closer. Through the lens, I saw fine cracks opening in the dirt, closing again, then opening wider. Each movement released a faint mist that hugged the ground before dissolving into the air. The smell intensified, sweet, rotten, and unmistakably organic. I remembered another account from my research, a gravedigger's testimony from the late 1800s, dismissed at the time as hysteria. He claimed that during humid nights, the plague pits would sweat, releasing vapors that caused hallucinations, panic, even shared visions among those nearby. He quit after insisting the graves responded to voices. Standing there now, I wondered how many truths had been buried alongside the dead. A sound broke the stillness, a dull thud from beneath the soil, followed by another. Not random, rhythmic, as if something below was testing the ground above it. I took a step back and nearly lost my balance. The earth dipped under my heel, then corrected itself, like a body adjusting its weight. My heart pounded, each beat loud in my ears. I whispered the rules again, grounding myself in their familiarity. Never go alone. I checked the audio feed indicator on my recorder. Still live, still transmitting. That meant someone, somewhere, could hear this place breathing. The whispering returned, clearer this time. I caught fragments, syllables shaped by old dialects, languages no longer spoken. They didn't come from one point, but from everywhere at once, layered atop each other, overlapping like a crowd speaking through walls. The sound vibrated through my bones rather than my ears. I felt it in my chest, in my teeth. My vision blurred at the edges, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I wasn't sure if my feet were on solid ground anymore. I forced myself to kneel and steady my breathing. Panic feeds on uncertainty, and uncertainty feeds on darkness. I switched my flashlight back on. The beam swept across the mass grave and froze. Shapes pressed up against the soil from below, not fully formed, but distinct enough to recognize. A hand-like outline, fingers splayed as if pushing upward, the curve of a skull, flattened by centuries of weight. They faded as quickly as they appeared, sinking back into the earth with a wet, collapsing sound. The ground exhaled again, louder than before, a long, exhausted breath. I stood and began walking toward the exit once more, slower this time, measuring every step. The path resisted me. Each footfall felt heavier, as though the soil clung to my boots, reluctant to let go. I became acutely aware of the cemetery's boundaries, not just physical, but something older, something intentional. These graves had been sealed for a reason, not merely to contain disease, but to keep something contained. Fear, memory, or whatever remained when people died too quickly to understand what was happening to them. Halfway to the gate, I heard footsteps behind me. They were not mine. Slow, uneven, dragging slightly as if whoever or whatever was walking had forgotten how. I did not turn around. Turning around would have acknowledged it. Instead, I focused on the gate ahead, its outline sharp against the night sky. The footsteps grew closer, stopping when I stopped, resuming when I moved. A cruel imitation. Just before I reached the gate, the whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a single, unified sound, a low moan rising from beneath every grave at once. The soil vibrated. Headstones rattled softly, clicking against each other like teeth. I gripped the gate and pulled it open, metal screaming in protest. As I stepped through, a sudden pressure hit my back, not a push, but a presence, dense and cold. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the other side. When I turned, the gate slammed shut on its own, the lock clicking into place. The cemetery fell silent again, but the recorder in my pocket was still running, and it was capturing something I hadn't heard yet. I didn't leave immediately. I should have. Every survival instinct and every rule I'd repeated to myself said the same thing. Get out while you still can. But I stood outside the gate, breathing hard, staring through the bars into darkness that seemed thicker than before. The cemetery didn't look different from the outside. If anything, it looked smaller, ordinary, just broken stones and dead weeds. Yet my body knew what my eyes couldn't prove. Something had moved in there. Something had listened. I walked away only after my hands stopped shaking. My van was parked where I'd left it, under a stand of trees along the access road. I climbed into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. The interior smelled like plastic, dust, and stale coffee, comfortingly human. I took out the recorder and held it in my palm, feeling its faint warmth. It had been in my pocket the whole time. I hadn't played anything back yet because I didn't want to hear confirmation of what I feared. But part of my job, my curse really, was that I never left questions unanswered for long. I pressed play. At first, there was only my own breathing and the crunch of gravel. Then the soft rise and fall sound beneath the graves returned, captured more clearly than I'd heard it live. It wasn't just a sigh. It was patterned, like lungs working, like effort. A long inhale, a pause, an exhale that carried a wet rasp, as if something were breathing through soil. Then my whisper. The moment I asked permission at the gate, I held my breath while listening. The audio should have contained only my voice and the wind. But underneath my words, faintly, something answered. Not in language I recognized, more like a murmur that shifted tones as if matching my cadence. It came right after my sentence, the way a person replies in conversation. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was casual, familiar. My skin prickled. I rewound and played it again. The reply was still there, and now I could hear something else. A thin clicking sound in the background, like stone tapping stone, or teeth chattering softly. I looked up at the cemetery through the windshield. The gate was a dark line in the distance. Nothing moved, and yet the audio made it feel as if I were still standing inside. I fast-forwarded to the moment near the mass grave. The tremors, the cracks, the mist. The whispers came back on the recording too, but they weren't scattered anymore. They were layered with structure, like a chorus trying to organize itself. As I listened, my brain did something it shouldn't have been able to do. It started finding patterns. Not words exactly, but repetition, rhythm, intent. The sound was closer to someone reciting something again and again, like a ritual that never ended. Then I reached the part where I heard footsteps behind me. On the recorder, my footsteps were there, steady, controlled. But behind them was another set, just as I remembered. Dragging, uncertain. Then, this is what made my stomach drop. There was a third set of steps. Lighter, faster, circling. 3 presences moving in relation to me, as if I'd been surrounded without realizing it. I stopped the playback. The van felt suddenly too quiet. The air inside seemed to thin, as if all the oxygen had been used by the recording itself. I stared at the small red light on the recorder and realized it was still blinking, still armed, still listening. I hadn't turned it back on. My throat tightened. I checked the device. The switch was set to off, yet the indicator light pulsed faintly, the way it had when it was transmitting live. I held it closer to my ear, and there, just barely, was a low hiss, not static. A whisper so soft it could have been imagined, except it rose and fell in the same rhythm as the cemetery's breathing. I told myself it was interference, a mechanical fault, something explainable. But my hand moved on its own, reaching into my bag for the camera, checking the photos I'd taken. The first images near the gate were normal. Rust, weeds, leaning stones. Then came the photos of the mass graves. In several frames, the soil looked blurred, as if moving. In one shot, illuminated by flash, the ground showed shallow cracks shaped like branching veins, and in the center of that image, something else. A pale shape pressed against the soil from below. clearer than what my eyes had seen. It looked like a face, flattened, mouth open, as if taking air that wasn't meant for it. I shut the camera off. The moment I did, the van's cabin light flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my neck. I started the engine immediately. The radio came on by itself, tuned to a dead frequency that produced only hiss. Except it wasn't only hiss. Underneath the static, faint and rhythmic, was the same breathing sound. I turned the radio off. It turned back on. I turned it off again, harder, like force would matter. It turned back on with a small click, and this time the static carried something else. Soft syllables that matched the cadence of my earlier whisper at the gate. Like the cemetery had memorized my voice and was practicing it. That's when I understood the danger of the first rule in a way I'd never considered before. Ask for permission wasn't just courtesy. It was a transaction. It was a door. And once you've spoken to a place like that, once you've treated it like something that can respond, it might decide it has permission to speak back. I drove away fast, headlights slicing through the trees. The road out was narrow and wet, and every curve felt like it could lead back to the gate even if I'd already passed it. I kept my eyes on the asphalt, refusing to glance at the rearview mirror for too long. In the mirror, darkness pooled behind me, and for several seconds at a time, I was sure I saw something moving within it, an outline that didn't match the road. When I reached the main highway, the radio finally went silent. The cabin felt warmer. I breathed again, deeper, trying to reclaim normal air. But the recorder in my cup holder still blinked softly, and in the silence I could hear that faint hiss continuing, like someone whispering through cloth. I didn't sleep when I got back. I uploaded the files, backed them up, labeled everything with dates and location stamps the way I always do. Discipline is how you keep fear from taking over. Yet when dawn came, I found something I couldn't explain in any file. There was a new audio clip on the recorder. It wasn't time-stamped with the night's recordings. It was created hours later, after I'd driven away, after the device was supposedly off. The file name was not a number like the others. It was a string of corrupted characters, except for one clear sequence that looked like a word. A word I hadn't typed. A word that matched what the locals called that cemetery. And when I played the clip, there was only one sound. A slow inhale, a pause, and a long, satisfied exhale. As if the place, miles away, had finally filled its lungs. But that still wasn't the strangest part. The days that followed passed slowly, as if time itself had thickened. I avoided listening to the recordings again, not out of fear alone, but caution. Some things, once acknowledged too often, grow more confident. I archived the files, encrypted them, stored copies in places I rarely accessed. Yet even when I tried to focus on other work, the memory of that cemetery followed me, not as images, but as sensations. The feeling of ground that was never fully still, air that felt borrowed, silence that listened back. I later spoke with a historian who specialized in epidemic burial practices. Without prompting, he mentioned reports from several plague cemeteries across Europe and Asia, accounts of soil movement, warm ground in winter, unexplained sounds recorded by survey equipment. Most of these reports were quietly dismissed, filed under natural gas emissions or ground settling. But there was one detail he added almost as an afterthought. In several regions, locals believed the dead did not simply decay. They waited. Waiting, they said, for the world above to forget them completely. Because as long as they were remembered, they were not finished breathing. That idea stayed with me. I haven't returned to that cemetery, and I won't. Not because I'm afraid, though fear is part of it, but because some places don't need to be revisited to remain active. They continue on their own. Occasionally late at night, when everything is quiet, I think I hear that same slow rhythm beneath the sounds of the city. A deep inhale, a pause, an exhale. I remind myself it's imagination, memory, the echo of a stressful night. Still, I follow the rules more carefully now. I ask permission with greater respect. I never linger longer than necessary, and I never assume that leaving a place means it has finished with me. There are other locations waiting, other burial grounds, other stories that surface only after dark. And somewhere, not far from where you are listening right now, there is a place where the ground is not entirely asleep. Until next time, take care of yourself, move carefully, and if you choose to walk into the dark with me again, remember to listen, not just to my voice, but to what's breathing quietly beneath it.